Well, hello, and welcome to the Astrology channel. I am Joji. I am an astrologer and a Venus and Gemini, which means that my Spotify playlists go from Slipknot to Charlie XCX in 2 seconds. And as always, I'm here with my good friend Kyle Pierce. Hi, Kyle.
Hi, Joe. I'm Kyle Pierce. I'm also an astrologer, and I also have Venus and Gemini. And my playlist goes from Katy Perry to Cannibal Corpse. I don't
Nice.
actually listen to Cannibal Corpse. It's actually really bad metal, and I have much more refined taste in metal than that. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, on that
Um,
note, Kyle, what's happening this week?
This week is kind of nice compared to maybe others. We see a shift in the moon's placement by sign on its day of the week, Monday, shifting to cardinal signs. We get a Mercury stationing retrograde at the end of the week. Pluto goes back into Aquarius. Venus and Saturn are in a nice little mixed mutual reception, which can be good for things. And we enter Sagittarius season this week. Yeah, a lot going on this week.
Well, on that note, let's get started with our Monday. As always, it's the moon's day. This is November 18th. The moon is waning. She is at home in Cancer in her element, and Venus is back in Mars's terms, moving towards a Venus opposition and Jupiter's Antisha. It's an interesting and fun day. I would say a relaxing day, even. It's really nice that the moon is having this opposition to Venus and being in Jupiter's Antisha. So the moon is already connected with the benefics, which kind of builds on some of those good vibes. I feel like the Venus opposition might do something similar to what we've talked about a couple of weeks ago, where these good things may be a little distant, or we may have to put a little bit of effort to get to those things, but they're very much available. And that's why in the image, I have just Lady Moon taking a nap. The moon is waning. She's in her own sign, and she's with the benefics. It's a time to relax and feel good and count your victories, especially since Mars is not there for now and will be coming back soon. And then next times that the moon will be coming around here, she'll probably have some company. So it's nice to have this moment of quietude.
There are probably like more perfect ways for the moon to receive lots of attention from benefics. There's like flavors of cake and ice cream that we might prefer a little bit better, but it's totally a cake and ice cream day. This is pretty ideal circumstances, especially with the moon being in Cancer. Because the moon is starting to wane, there's a little more focus on clearing out things which maybe impede growth or prosperity, making space for things that you would like to nurture and cultivate. But there is a lot of support from both Jupiter and Venus in cultivating those things and maybe identifying clearly what we want to bring about more of in our lives. But there's a little more emphasis on making space for those things as opposed to just stuffing our basement with all the cool new things that we find.
Yeah, and I think for those reasons, we settled at a 1.5 difficulty. I think this is the lowest difficulty rating that we've gotten in a while. And we maxed out our utility for today. That's really nice. Or no, Kyle, is there anybody who will have an easier time settling into this lunar vibe?
I mean, Cancer people are definitely going to have the clearest relationship with that, and will probably benefit from it the most. But I think we got to look at your Capricorn and probably your Gemini people as well, because it's both bringing in goodies from those signs where Jupiter and Venus are, but also is serving as a profitable customer, maybe, for those signs.
Nice. Moving on to our Tuesday. This is November 19th. It's Mars's day. Mars is in Leo, out of element, and Saturn's decadent in Jupiter's terms, soon being received by the sun through a trine.
Compared to other Tuesdays that we've had and will be having, I'm less troubled by this one than than most of them for a while. But I don't love that Pluto is ingressing into Aquarius, so we're gonna get a little bit of that opposition coming back into play, and we don't quite have the sun applying to the trine with Mars quite yet. But I think what we're getting is the sort of prelude to maybe a reframe that we're going to be doing throughout the week, where we're identifying what the target is, choosing a direction, and maybe preparing to have to maybe at least outwardly go backwards in order to get there. But I think we're getting a sense of what that target is, or we're being introduced to the enemy that needs to be overcome. It's not the most difficult Tuesday that we will have or have had, but it's still, there's still something uneasy about the day that I would just want to pay attention to.
Yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings about today too. It's nice that the sun is moving towards this trine with Mars, but as of today, that's still not happening. The thing that I was sitting with for today, it's just this idea of the sun-Mars reception that's going to happen through this trine. It feels, well, like Kyle was saying, it feels like it's giving direction to Mars to retrace his steps in a way that's maybe more clear than it was before. Because if you remember how Mars started its journey in Cancer all the way back in the summer, is that Mars squared Neptune and then crossed into Cancer. And all the images that we've had for Mars in Cancer are pretty lonesome. It's like Mars unresourced, trying to figure out what the hell to do. And then now Mars is having to like retrace these steps and having to do a whole other thing. So I think that the silver lining, or the good thing about today, is that we're getting this direction. And that's why I had in the image like Mars just looking into this light or into this fire, and far away he sees the king being carried in a chariot with a whole bunch of other soldiers to give him some sort of assistance or support. So I think that going into this, we still have to deal with some of the difficulties of this Mars story, but it's a moment of getting like a power boost. Because we talked about Pluto as being kind of like a boss battle, and it's interesting because you can think about like a Castlevania or those old games where you have like you're fighting a boss and then you feel like you beat it, but then suddenly the boss has like a second form and you have to beat it in a whole new way, and you've exhausted your resources and all those things. And that's very much what's going to happen, because the next time that Mars and Pluto oppose, Pluto will be in Aquarius. It's like Pluto, new form. So I think that the sun coming in is giving Mars just like that little potion that you get in between these two phases of the boss battle. Is it going to be enough? That's a good question. But
conserve your potions and assume that there will be more than one boss battle to come.
The second one is not the last one either. But yeah, for those reasons, we give today a middle of the road rating. It's as difficult as it is useful. The usefulness is in getting prepared. The difficulty is some of the same things we've been dealing with for the past little while. But Kyle, who should be paying attention to today? Who is boss battling and conserving their potions?
I think we're really looking at the Leo, Aries, and Scorpio. But I think Sagittarius might want to start paying attention as well, because it's, as the sun enters Sagittarius, it's going to be like playing importer-exporter with what Mars is doing.
Right on. Well, moving on to our Wednesday. It is Mercury's day. Mercury is in Sagittarius, out of sect, slowing down in Saturn's decan and in their own terms, and also in Venus's Antisha. We've been talking about the Mercury-Jupiter opposition as a thing that we will be dealing with for the foreseeable future. Jupiter's retrograde, Mercury is going retrograde this week, so it's not just a one and done opposition. We're gonna go through this over and over and over again. But this moment in particular, I find interesting because this is Mercury just having separated from Jupiter, and now on this very day, Mercury meets Venus through Antisha, and Venus is in Capricorn, which is a naturally slower sign too, and I feel like it really builds up on this theme of slowing down. So in the image, I just have Mercury still at their desk like they were last week, full of papers, things are everywhere, we're thinking and brainstorming and trying to problem solve with Jupiter. But Mercury is also taking a little bit of a step back. It's still chewing on that pencil, it's still a little anxious, but It's taking a step back to look out the window and see the broader long-term picture.
Yeah, I actually kind of like this. I think especially as we're preparing for the retrograde and maybe some of the conclusions that we jumped to while Mercury was direct in Sagittarius, we're going to have to kind of go back and reassess and figure out where we went wrong, maybe reconfigure the propaganda machine. And I think that maybe Venus's influence here, and maybe Jupiter's influence too still, will have Mercury bringing in more consideration for maybe like a longer term perspective or what is more beneficial to a larger number of people. There's a more diplomatic tone that I think is trying to be struck, which I think can be more positive and overall more useful.
Yeah, and for those reasons, today is not too difficult. It's a 2.5 difficulty and a 3 utility, and I think that the utility really is in thinking about this big picture, the long-term goals and the long-term plans, and kind of taking a step back from the immediacy of things. But Kyle, who is thinking long-term today?
We're definitely looking at the mutable signs, but watch out for Capricorn as well. Venus is going to be talking to Mercury quite a bit, so I think we might see some of what Mercury's doing showing up in that space as well.
Well, moving on to our Thursday, it is November 21st. It is Jupiter's day. Jupiter is in Gemini, in detriment, in his element, and Mars is decan in terms, moving towards Venus's contra Tesla and soon receiving a sextile from the moon.
I think there's a way that this relationship with Venus is sort of giving Jupiter an opportunity to place some extraneous bits of data or unreconciled contradictory elements that were just sort of like hanging out in the wind, is maybe able to find a place for those in a longer term project, like finding that like this weird shaped Lego block that has just been like hanging out in your pile for a while is you're actually at a step in the process of building your little Lego spaceship that can really use that weird little piece. So I think there's finding a place for odd bits is potentially useful, but there could be a little bit of a temptation to hold on to things that seem like they might be useful in the future that don't actually end up being useful, but that's okay.
Yeah, I don't think today's an entirely difficult day either. I think the interesting thing is just, again, that the fact that Mercury is separating from Jupiter. But the other thing that I also wanted to refer back to is last week we were talking about how Mercury and Jupiter were together, realizing that the blueprint or the instruction manual that they had was faulty and didn't have all the pieces that they needed. And they had to really just brainstorm and get together to figure out how to do that in like this new and innovative way that hasn't been done before. They're having to use both of their strengths and weaknesses to their benefits to be able to overcome this hurdle. But then in this image again, seems like Mercury has moved on and they're both with manuals in their hands again. It's kind of like going back to the thing that hasn't worked, but with the hopes that it will work this time. But Mercury is still not yet retrograde. It will be retrograde at the end of the week. And so I was thinking that this is kind of just like a little bit of a hiccup before we get to that retrograde and we're able to tackle these things again in earnest. Again, like Jupiter and Mercury will oppose each other 3 times. And so I think that the second time that will come around will be them coming up with this new way of doing things. And then hopefully the third time will be like the actual implementation of this and we'll be able to move forward. But on that note, I think that, again, another middle of the road day. It's a 3 difficulty and a 3 utility. Like we said, the utility is trying to find the place for these odd pieces in the puzzle. But Kyle, who is thinking today? Hopefully everybody, but who's especially thinking today?
Oh, if only everybody were thinking. Definitely the mutable signs is what we're looking at, but I feel like the theme maybe this week is don't sleep on Capricorn. I think Venus kind of secretly has her hands in a lot of different pots right now.
Nice. Well, that is a perfect segue into our Friday with Venus and Capricorn. She is in her element, and Mars is decan in Jupiter's terms, mutually receiving Saturn through a sextile.
This is pretty nice. It's not like raw beneficence the way that you might get with just pure Venus Jupiter action, maybe. But this is a pretty favorable interaction between Venus and Saturn that I think is the focus today. This Venus Saturn mixed mutual reception. Saturn's in the sign of Venus's exaltation, and Venus is in a sign of Saturn's rulership. So Venus Saturn stuff isn't always purely feel good, but when they're favorably intertwined, it can make for enduring, longer lasting relationships and connecting through difficulty. The theme here, I think, is in some way experiences of separation or isolation or maybe existential deprivation of some kind is somehow adding or enhancing interpersonal connections, which I think intuitively we can see how those experiences bond people together and make the moments of connection more rich and more enjoyable. I think there's also a lot of potential for some reunions after long periods of separation. And overall, I think it's rather lovely, if a little bit bittersweet.
Yeah, I feel like that's really it today. It's just the sense of, well, now it's great, but the journey that it took for us to be here was one that was pretty difficult. I feel like today can be like a day of reaping the rewards of some of these long and arduous journeys. There is a little bit of romance, I think, that can be found there too, with just Venus and Saturn being in Pisces. I feel like there is something along those lines, but it's not on that sort of youthful romance, like butterfly feelings and all that stuff. It's more of that like serious companionship, and that's really what I tried to capture in the image. I just have this elderly lesbian couple just having a nice date, a nice wine date. They're both holding the same wine glass together. Behind them is this ugly wintry scene, but they're tucked away in this like nice, cozy and comfortable place where they can reminisce on their old memories and the difficulties that they've had to face to be together. And for those reasons, we settled at a 1.5 difficulty and a 4 utility. There's a lot that can be done today. But Kyle, who is having this sweet and tender moment today?
I think we'll see it most profoundly showing up in Pisces and Capricorn.
Nice. Well, moving on into our weekend, continuing with Saturn. Saturn finally out of the boat. So nice seeing Saturn days with no boat. So Saturn is still in Pisces, out of element, peregrine, and Jupiter's Deccan terms, recently departing from a Venus sextile, like we just talked about, and soon receiving an opposition from the moon. Yeah, I think this is continuing the same story. Venus and Saturn, these two lovely lesbians out on the beach, just having a nice, sweet moment together. I think that the moon opposition, though, is just can be this nagging thing that ruins what would be a very intimate and profound moment, I guess. The moon, for me in this image, are just all these annoying people on the beach ruining the fucking moment. We could just be out there like watching the waves float by and like telling stories about our yesteryears and whatever, but no, there's kids yelling in the background and somebody is doing barbecue and just kind of like souring a little bit of that moment. But I don't think that it really ruins it all. It's all these minor little nuisances that can make something a little less perfect.
I think with that moon opposition, we're having the like lived experience of this day made less enjoyable by something. I think overall the romantic evening or like reunion, the like overall spirit of that remains intact, but like somebody gets diarrhea and it's made a little bit less romantic by that and maybe a little less like pleasant on a lived level, but the memory that's formed is still one of bonding. I kind of think that Venus and Saturn are sort of well situated to put that into a context. It can be a funny story if after not seeing each other for a year, you have a romantic evening and wanted to crap your pants like at dinner, But because you love each other so much, like, if anything, it's like, I love you even more for your human frailty, and the one who craps their pants loves the other one even more for loving them through the embarrassing moment. I think there's a lot of lessons in humility, and I think what a lot of mature love is about.
Yeah, we settled on a 2 difficulty for today, and we gave it a 3.5 utility. Still, there's a lot that can be done for our Venus and Saturn people. But Kyle, who is...
He's crapping their pants at dinner today.
Yeah.
I think we're still focused on the Pisces, Capricorn people for sure. Your other Venus and Saturn rule signs, Libra, Taurus, Aquarius, all those. But I think let's pay extra attention to Virgo. I think those maybe Virgo is the most susceptible to indigestion today, and maybe more prone to let that experience sour an otherwise beautiful evening.
Moving on to our Sunday. It's November 24th. The sun is in Sagittarius now, and his element, Mercury's declination and Jupiter's terms, moving from a Pluto sextile to a Mars trine. Oh, the sun is finally feeling a little better about himself. Good for you, Saj.
I think overall, at least on like a individual level, we might feel a little more pep in our step. You know, there's a little more enthusiasm on tap, or a sense of energy, a sense of like knowing where we want to go with the day. Today seems like a good day for like rallying the troops a little bit. You'll find it easier than usual to sign people up to get in the trenches and be shot at for the next 6 months or so. Just know that that's maybe what you might be signing up for. It just may not be as fun and exciting as you're anticipating.
It's interesting because the Sagittarius story is really just getting started. I think for now, the biggest thing is just that sense of the sun is out of the cave. The sun has been without dignity for a really long time. And I don't know about you guys. The sun has been like one of the stories that I've related to the most. And so I'm curious which planet seems to be telling your story as well. But I'm seeing this as like this coming out of the cave and just being able to be out there in the world again and having the energy and the vitality and the determination to do so. The Mars trine that kicks off this Sun and Sagittarius season feels really good for some of those things. The one thing that I would like to turn your attention to, though, is just the image and how it looks like. Because one of the biggest things that we talked about through the sun's journey, from Libra through Scorpio, is that the sun had to give up his crown. The sun not only had to give up his crown, the sun has lost his crown, lost the kingdom. Everything kind of just came falling down. Hence why the sun had to go into this cave to do this deep soul searching. But then the sun walked into the cave with a crown and is leaving with a sword. That sword, yes, gives us the determination that we've been talking about, but it can also hurt. It can also bring, yes, violence, but also just sometimes the aggressiveness that might not be so useful in actually pursuing our goal. Sometimes it's not just about like going forth and conquering everything that's in your way. And I think that the Sun, Mars trine and being in Sagittarius might be inclined towards things like that. So I would just watch that. But I don't think today is an entirely difficult day. We gave it a 2 difficulty and a 3 utility because there is a lot that can be done with the Sun, Mars trine, and with the Sun in Sagittarius. It's just be wary of where you're channeling that energy or that force towards, and just be willing to manage them. But on that note, Kyle, who should be keeping an eye out on their energy levels today?
I think we're really looking primarily at Leo and Sagittarius, where we're going to see a lot of that, this interaction between Mars and the Sun is pretty potent.
Well, this is our week, guys. Let's take a look at our week at a glance. On Monday, the moon is taking a little bit of a rest. Nice for the moon. It's been a while since the moon's been able to do so.
Tuesday, we're recovering from the first boss battle and maybe re-upping our potions for the next couple of them.
And between Tuesday and Wednesday, we also have Pluto stepping back into Aquarius. We have a video all about that out. So if you are curious what that means to you, we actually went through all the 12 signs and what you might expect. So you can click the link somewhere. Wednesday, Mercury is doing some nice problem solving, slowing down a little bit though, so Mercury can really get a solid understanding of what the problem is.
Reprogramming the propaganda machine. Thursday, we're finding a place for the odd little bits and pieces into the bigger project and picture.
Yeah, Friday, we continue with this big picture mode, but we're more so reaping the benefits or the rewards of having been through a long journey like that.
On Saturday, we're loving each other through good times and indigestion.
And on Sunday, the sun is coming out of the cave, left the crown behind, and is now carrying a sword. What will the sun do with that sword? But on that note, this is our week. Let's look at our week's utility and difficulty ratings. The week starts on a pretty good note. It's nice to have the moon in a cardinal sign. Cardinal signs are already initiating. The first day of the week seems pretty good to have that kind of vibe. The moon is also super strong. It's the one day that I would not do all the things that you want to be doing. It's more of a resting before doing things kind of day. And so I would invite you to enjoy that day. Otherwise, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are a little bit more difficult days, but our weekend is looking pretty good, not gonna lie.
Yeah, so we're settling at an overall about 2 difficulty and a 3 to 4 utility. Overall, pretty lovely week. I would take advantage of it. We still have, the broader context of things maybe that can be challenging, but I think on a day-to-day level, we're getting some good stuff this week.
Yeah, enjoy, guys. And if you want a reading with me, I am Joe G, and you can find me at themercuryrising.com.
And you can book a reading with me at KylePierceAstrologer.com.
All right, guys, we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
The top.